Hello, my name's Duncan and welcome to Back to Books and Back Away from the Donkey. And here we are on this fine day. It is my birthday today. Did you send me a card? You didn't. Oh well. But you're here, aren't you? You're here. So, this video is a bit different to me because I don't normally do big sort of lists like this. And I've titled it, the title is a bit of a sort of clickbaity one because they're not really my favourite books of all time because, well, some of them are, but it would change. If you ask me next week, they'll change because I'm quite random like that. They're never set in stone. New books that I read, and I remember books. But these are like a collection of books that, if my house was on fire, I would love to grab and take with me. And I reread them and I love them. And I've got history with them. They may not all be the greatest literature, but they're all good books and worth anybody's time as far as I'm concerned. So, on this, my birthday, I am years old. So for every year of my existence on this planet, I have picked one book. I said, not in any real particular order, though I will say when we get down to the final 10 to 15, that lot will be more like my top favourite books that I would always end up picking for a big list like this. So I've got 55 books, so I decided the best way to do it, rather than me sitting here for probably an hour and a half or whatever, and boring everybody, I'm going to split it over the week. So today is Monday, as long as I've edited this and put this out on the correct day. And I will put the second part out on Tuesday and the final part out on Wednesday. So I'll do 20 books today, 20 on Wednesday, and the final 15 on Friday. I will have a couple more other videos flicking up this week, all to do with my birthday, but wait and see what those are. So yeah, if you want to see this list, it is up on my Goodreads. I will try and put a link below because I think I can do that. I don't know, because Goodreads is a law unto itself and it's a horrible, horrible piece of software. So I'm going to try and briefly talk about some books. Some books I'll talk about more than others, and it's what I can remember. And there may be a couple of edits in here, but I will try and keep them short because if I do them, they won't be jump cuts because I absolutely hate jump cuts. And if you're the person who keeps doing them, please stop it. It makes my head hurt. I'm just going to have a sip of my drink, and here we go. So here's my piece of paper. If you hear a funny noise in the background, there's a Yorkshire Terrier sitting on a chair over there, snoring. Can you hear? He stopped now. Ah, there it is. So, let me get my list. Book one. What I will start off with saying is, a lot of these books will be science fiction because that is the main thing I read and is my main love. But there's some other ones that aren't. And so it's not a specific science fiction list because a science fiction list would be quite different to this, even though some of these books would exist on here. So I'll start at number 55, which I have, probably surprising some people. Tennyson, Selective Poems. I like myself a bit of Tennyson. This collection here is an Old Penguin classic one. It's Selective Poems. Hasn't got the Full of the Idylls of the King in, which is a shame, but it's really good because it's got some of the other bits in there. And I'm forever I go back and reread bits of Tennyson poetry because I just like it. I'm not a big person into this, but there is something about Tennyson that I really, really quite like. And so yes, so the Selected Poems. I've got the Idylls of the King. I think I've got the Oxford Classics version over there somewhere. But I picked this one because I think it's quite a nice collection. So yeah, I'm trying to work out where I'm going to put these books. I don't like putting books on floors, but I might have to. Yep, on the floor. So then we go to number 54, which is Robert Heinlein's Starman Jones. Now this is one of Heinlein's juveniles. I'll put a picture of it up there because I think it's in a box somewhere. It's one of Heinlein's juvenile novels that he wrote, along with like things like How Space Would Travel. I really, really like this book. It's a book I read originally probably about 1980, which would make me about 12. And I've constantly reread it over the years. And even though it's got that sort of juvenile feel to it, it's a really, really well done book. And it's better than some of his more adulty novels in some ways because there's certain stuff he excludes. But I really, really like it. And the main story is about this young guy who lives with his mother and his stepfather and ends up having to leave. And his uncle was an astrogator, somebody who basically pilots a spaceship. And he has the logbooks, which are, sorry, what's going to my head? Like the astrogators' Bibles. They are telling what they're doing from his uncle, who was one. And he returns them to the astrogators' field. Then he finds a way to smuggle himself aboard a starship, and the story follows on from then. If you want some nice, sort of easy, straightforward reading, it's really well worth a read. Sorry, my computer's just made a weird noise in the background, so it's really worth a read. But yeah, that's Heinlein Starman Jones. I think this is the only Heinlein book I've got on this list, or I may have one more. Can't remember. So I keep scratching my head. I haven't got dog fleas, honest. Just need to sip a drink. As with all my videos, not the most polished of videos. So, down to 53, and I've picked Julian Mayes' Many-Coloured Anne, which is part of the Saga of the Exiles. It's the first book, and it's one of these science fiction books that feels like a fantasy. I've got a paperback copy. This is a book club edition, actually. For some reason, I've got hardback cover. Is anything on the cover, or is it just a plain back cover? Just a plain cover. But anyway, yeah, if you've not read it, it's great. It's one of these science fiction books that feels like fantasy in some ways. And it's basically about almost a time travel thing. Man discovers a way to travel back to 6 million years ago. So well before mankind existed. And people, but it's only one way. And people go back because they want a new life out of the technology of the day. So we go for a cast of characters. They've got one character called Aiken Drum, as in the famous poem. And when they go back, they discover that basically an alien race has landed on Earth and is basically enslaving all the humans that have gone back. And then we just follow them through society. I'm trying not to give too much away here. What makes it so good is the characterization and the sort of sociology of the society, the alien society, and then how the humans can move up in it, and the changes. Sorry, I burped there a second. But yeah, if you've not read the Saga of the Exiles, well worth it. Julian Mayes. I think people seem to forget about her sometimes. She did do a science fiction series, which I can't remember what's called off the top of my head, but I've never got around to reading it. And that's apparently really good as well. But I need to probably put it on my list of many, many things I need to read. So now we go to number 52, which I put Andy Weir's The Martian in. Which, what can I say about The Martian that everybody else has not said? I loved it. It's really easy to read. You've got the technical stuff in there. And it's just a really, really good book. I find it weird because people normally go for Project Hail Mary, and I've struggled with that book for some reason, and everybody else seems to love it. I actually prefer Artemis's second book, the Project Hail Mary, which is quite strange for people. But The Martian, I love The Martian, and it's one of these books that, yeah, if I had to run out of the house, I'd like to grab it because it's a great, great copy. And once you've read the proper version, it's still worth listening to the audiobook, which is actually on Audible, which is actually really well done, which I've done a couple of times as well. I have a thing with audiobooks is I only listen to stuff that I've already read. Just because that's my I am. I don't listen to huge amounts of them. That's probably why. My wife, who as you probably know has got a disability, she listens to a lot more than I do because physically she has problems reading. She can to a degree, but her short-term memory gets a bit funny sometimes, and also the physical thing of holding a book, even a Kindle, doesn't work always very well for her. So she listens to a lot more than I do, and she sometimes turns around to me and says, "You need to listen to this," or "You need to get a copy of that and read it." Anyway, I diverged from my list. So, number 51. I've not got a copy of the book in front of me, but it's Harry Harrison's Make Room, Make Room, which you probably know was filmed as Soylent Green, and Soylent Green's got a totally different ending that has nothing to do with the book. But Soylent Green's a good film in its own right, but if you've seen the film, that ending is not to do with the book. Harry Harrison had a thing about overpopulation. He's read quite a few short stories about it. And I really like Harrison. I obviously love the Stainless Steel Rat books. His more serious stuff, his To the Stars trilogy, which starts with Riverworld, is really, really good. I said I've just reread the Death World books, but Make Room is basically a detective story. You're in like a dystopian future, food is short, people overpopulation, and you have this detective trying to solve a murder of somebody important, because it's got to be important because they don't investigate the other ones, and you've got all the sort of background to that, and it brings you to the culture of how people are treated and how some women are treated as objects just so that they can get the food. But it is a really, really good book, and it is probably his best book, his best sort of non-comedic book, though I'm a big fan of West of Eden as well, and there's some of his alternate history ones he did in the 90s that I've not read yet. But I said I was first turned on to Harrison by the Stainless Steel Rat books, which I read, that must have been in the early 80s as well, maybe late 70s I first read those. But I said his more serious stuff is really, really good and sometimes gets avoided. If you can, pick up his short stories. The Streets of Ashkelon is one of my favourite short stories of all time. Anyway, that's enough of me rambling on about Harry Harrison. Just going to get a sip of drink here. Next book. Okay, not the greatest literature in the world, but I have to include something. If you all know, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. You can probably see behind me I am. And I'm picking Alan Dean Foster's Splinter of the Mind's Eye. I think Alan Dean Foster is a really good writer. This obviously was done from a story inspired by George Lucas, and it was the sequel to the Star Wars novelization that he wrote, and it was made to be what would have been a low-budget film if Star Wars hadn't been such a success. But there's bits about it I really like. I said it's one of the original sort of Star Wars books, and the use of the Jedi Knights isn't like it is in later books or even the later films, where it's really, really powerful. It's really quite subtle, and it's more like an almost. There's a bit down it. I just really, really like it, and it's sort of. It's not the greatest literature in the world, I admit that, but it's a good book. And if you like Star Wars, and if you've never read it, it's worth reading it, because it could show you what, if they'd followed this way of how they developed this sort of Star Wars universe, it would have been quite different. And that's why I really like it. So yeah, so that is number are we up to? Number 50. Okay, another 15 to go. I'm trying not to ramble too much, but it'll happen. Next we go to number 49, which is a non-fiction. So there's quite a mixture in here, which is Brian Keenan's An Evil Cradling. My history with this book, I went back to college, then university, to restudy, and I had to do an English course, and part of the English course we were asked to read this and examine this book, and this is a great, great book. Brian Keenan, if you don't know, was a reporter in Beirut. What year was it? 1985, and he was captured by some fundamentalists, Shiite Muslims, and he was kept prisoner for 2 years, along with Terry Waite, who was as well. And this is his story about it. But what's great about it, it is not an easy read. But what's great about it is descriptions. Is a lot of it is about what's going on in his brain, but also what's going on in his captor's brain, because he explains that they are almost prisoners themselves, and they've almost been as brutalized as he's been brutalized. It's very hard to describe. It is not an easy read, but it is a great, great book, and that's Brian Keenan's An Evil Cradling. Oop, drop that down there. Pick these up. Next, we get to number 48. Robert Silverberg, Gilgamesh the King. And it's Robert Silverberg's retelling of the Epic of Gilgamesh. I've got the, I'm trying to think over there. Yeah, it's the Oxford edition of the Epic, one of the oldest pieces of, I think it might be the oldest piece of literature found. But this is his retelling. He takes away a lot of the fantastical elements of the original text, but that in some ways works really well. And if you want to, I would suggest reading this and also the original Epic as well. But it's really good. So it's more like historical fiction. Next, number 47, Robots of Dawn, Isaac Asimov. Big Asimov fan, I love his writings. Robots of Dawn is one of his Elijah Baley books, which are free basically detective novels about robots. And Robots of Dawn is the third one. Yeah, for some reason, that one is the one that I picked. But it could have been any of them. The Case of Steel is the first one, and I think I quite like these. I love the Foundation books. These have got characterizations more because you're following the Detective Elijah Baley's from Earth. Earth is everybody's living on top of each other, and people are scared of open spaces, so it's quite claustrophobic. Whereas you go to the outside worlds, the space of worlds, and the opposite has happened, and humans, Earthmen, are almost kept to their planet. So he gets the chance to go off to investigate a murder, and it's a murder of a robot. But he's almost seeing how the spaces, the people who live off Earth, have changed and are almost dying in their own way. Hopefully that makes some sense. But yeah, great detective books, and Asimov's always a nice, straightforward, easy read. Not easy read, but comfortable reader for me. So yeah, but any of the Elijah Baley books, 3 of them, and well worth a read. Sorry, I'm gonna have a sip. I'm worried that I'm rambling too much here because I don't normally do videos. Okay, so we get to 46. Sherlock Holmes. I like Sherlock Holmes. I've got a couple of Sherlock Holmes books. I've picked this one, which is Crime Masterworks, which I've got a couple of. I've got one of some Edward Bain books. And this is Greatest Cases. This includes all the ones you'd expect, Hound of Baskervilles. Let's double check which ones it's got into it. I've got a nice penguin version as well. Yeah, it's got the complete adventures of Sherlock Holmes. It's got the Hound of the Baskervilles, Blue Carbuncle, Scandal Bohemia. It's got most of the famous ones. So this is actually a really nice collection if you ever see them around. The Crime Masterworks, I found a list of all of them in it, and a lot of books I don't know because I'm not really big into crime fiction, but I might try to. I have considered trying to pick them up just because they're recommending them, might be worth it. If anybody out there has got any of these Crime Masterworks books or knows some of the authors in them, be interested to talk to you about them. So, but yeah, this Sherlock Holmes books. So I've got a penguin, one of the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. I've got quite a bit, but what can I say about Sherlock Holmes? It's Sherlock Holmes. You know what Sherlock Holmes is. So there's no point me describing that. I'll put that book down there. So followed by Sherlock Holmes, as we have got H.P. Lovecraft. I've picked this one. I've got 3 volumes that were published in the mid to late 80s. This one's the one that got the Mountains of Madness in there because it's one of my favourite stories. And there's 3 books in these volumes. I do not know whether these are complete of all Lovecraft's work, and I need to speak to Michael K. Vaughan about this because he seems to know what is the complete Lovecraft works. But these are really nice. I always love the covers of these. The second one is The Haunter of the Dark and Other Tales, and I can't remember what the third one is called, and I'm not going to go back there and get them. But yes, if I've got to take one Lovecraft book, I'd probably pick this one. And I said, Michael K. Vaughan, I need to speak to him and find out whether these volumes actually contain the complete Lovecraft or not. I probably don't, but I would be interested to know. So, following Lovecraft, can you guess who's going to be next? As I said, these aren't in any particular order. These are just, I said, top 55 books that I think are well worth it and I go back to and I love. So I've got Edgar Allan Poe, Selected Tales, Oxford World Classics ones. I've got a couple other collections of his, but I just picked this one off because, hey, and this is the Selected Tales ones. This Oxford Classics one got, I don't think it's stories has got into it. Sorry, watching a man flick through a book. Introduction. Yeah, it's got all the stuff that you'd expect in there, things like the Fall of the House of Usher, Mask of the Red Death. But yeah, it's a good one. Poe. And number 42, we're still on short stories type thing, and I picked another Alan Dean Foster book. I really like Alan Dean Foster short stories. This is Who Needs Enemies, which is my original book that I brought back in the early 80s, which was in my original famous box of books. I love the cover of this. And it's got some really nice stories. The one that... it's got a... I'm trying to think the name of the story now. Oh, Surf It, which is one of my favourite stories I really, really like, which is about surfing on a planet, but it's really, really strange story. His original stuff is really quite interesting compared to everybody reads all his novelizations. And these short stories are a really good, nice cross-section of the sort of writings that he does. So if you ever get a chance to read any short stories, I would. Surf It, I said, it's one of a really short story I really, really love. There's another one about the Dark Light Girl, which is quite an interesting one. And what's the other one called at the back end? Wooling's Folly, which is quite an interesting one, which reminds me of Gremlins to a degree. There was a collection he did before this called With Friends Like These, which I would love to get hold of, but I've only ever seen paperback versions, not in the flesh. I had a look online, and they were going for quite a lot of money. I'm not convinced it actually got published in the UK. This is a UK Orbit published this one. But yeah, so With Friends Like These, so if anybody out there sees that at a reasonable price, tell me, and I'll pay you for it. So we get now to number 41, which is probably the first proper fantasy. When I mean proper fantasy, you know what I mean. And that is Rayman Feist's Magician. This is my original UK copy that I brought back when it was published, which I loved, which got me into there. I'm at the moment rereading the whole of his Magician books, well, all the books that follow The World of Midikemia, and I think there's about 30 books. I'm about 19 at the moment. But it's about a young boy who discovers that he has the powers of magician, and it's about war between worlds, two sort of not parallel worlds, two worlds that get joined up, and there's battles between them. It's a really, really classic fantasy. This is the original version. I have this version here, which is the Author's Preferred Edition, which has got about another 200 or so pages. I'd always go for that one, sorry. A lot of the time the Author Preferred editions, I find they get a bit baggy, and it definitely does with the Magician one, because he expands on stuff that really didn't need to be expanded. It's a bit like The Stand. I prefer the version before Stephen King added about 400 pages to it. But yeah, so Rayman Feist's Magician. If you're into fantasy, if you've not read this, where have you been? It's like classic fantasy, but really well done. I'm not a huge fan of modern fantasy, what people call modern fantasy, because I just not really got onto it. People think they've reinvented the wheel, and these so-called morally great characters have reinvented the wheel, but there's always been morally great characters. If they've never seen Thomas Covenant or anybody else. But I'm not a huge fan of from what I read, but then I'm not a huge fan of what they call modern science fiction either. I find it quite unoriginal. Sounds weird, but yeah. A few bits I read, but no. And then we go to next one, number 40. So I've got to scratch my nose. I know probably in this video I'm keep scratching my nose, but for some reason it's itchy. I'm going to pick a Piers Anthony book. Piers Anthony is a bit of a lot of people dislike him. He can be a bit of a creepy old man in some of his books, but at his best he can write really well. I'm going to pick On a Pale Horse, which is the first of his Incarnations of Immortality series. What I find with him is his returns, the returns for his books go lower further on you go in the trilogy. Sometimes he writes really good, and then he sort of keeps expanding, and you end up with about 6 books, and by the 6th one, they're not particularly as good. I would read On a Pale Horse as a standalone. It is about death. It is about this man who's just about to dive, and he takes death in here is taken over by somebody. If you kill death, you become death, and it's about the collecting of the souls of people. But it just gets a really good discussion and thoughts around death and life and mortality, and it's really well done. He, as a writer, if you've not read him, he does go a bit sort of male gazy at certain points, and I know some people find him a bit icky because of that, but he still can do some good rants. I've got the Infinity Cluster, which I've never read of his, back there, which I want to get into. But yeah, so that was another one, Pale Horse. So next we get on to Dream Park, number 39. One of my favourite books of all time, and it's not the best literature in the world, but I really enjoy it. 2 copies, love that one. And one with Jim Burns cover. So Dream Park is, I can remember when this came out, and I was a big Dungeons and Dragons player. I was there when sort of Dungeons and Dragons got big initially. And it's about a park where people do almost live action role playing, but with holograms and things like this. And there's a murder somebody's got to investigate. And it's a really good, fun book. There is 2 sequels. There is the Moon Maze game, and can't remember what the other one is called off the top of my head. And they're good reads, but they're not as good as this first book, which I really, really love. So, and I sort of reread on quite a regular basis. It's sort of like a comfort read. So, that was Dream Park. And then we get to number 38. Only 3 more to go. I can leave you alone. And it's the first of the Philip K. Dicks. I'm sorry, there'll be more. I love Philip K. Dick. Big Philip K. Dick fan. First time I read him, I saw Blade Runner when it was released in 81. Was it 81 or was it 83? Can't remember. And I really liked the film. As I always state, I prefer the theatrical cut. But maybe it's just because that's what I saw. And then I went off and started consuming Philip K. Dick books. So the one I picked for this was my original copy of Flow My Tears, The Policeman Said. He still has some of the best titles around there. And this is a great book. It's about a man called Taverner. What's his first name? So tell me his name. Yeah, Jason Taverner, who is a big, big TV star. Millions of people love him. He's the centre of attention. And then he gets transported into the future, and nobody knows him, and he's trying to survive. And then it gets really Philip K. Dick and really weird. That's what I'm going to say. It's quite interesting because Jason Taverner, as a character in Philip K. Dick's novels, is not like his normal. I think part of the reason I quite like it is not like his normal antagonist. He is already the centre of attention. He's well known. Whereas Philip K. Dick normally writes characters that are like on the fringes of society, where he isn't. But then he almost ends up on the fringes of society. But that is a really good Philip K. Dick book. I could have picked most of his books because I really like them all. They do vary in quality, obviously, but for me, Flow My Tears is up there. And I said it won't be the last you see of Philip K. Dick on this list, because I said I am a big Philip K. Dick fan. And I know some people don't quite get on with him, but I can understand why. But then yeah. So then we are down to 38. I've got to turn the sheet of paper over. Oh, no, different, new sheet of paper. Number 37. I couldn't find a copy of the book because it's probably in the box. Is Golden Witch Breed by Mary Gentle. And this is another sort of science fiction one that almost feels fancy-wise. And it's about somebody who goes to... It's an envoy to a planet. And this planet has... human envoy to this planet. This planet doesn't like... tries to keep itself quite isolated, so it doesn't like things going into its culture. Think almost China 20 or 30 years ago, before they stopped letting a lot of Western influences get into them. So this culture, so she's the envoy to this planet, and they have a ancient, not race, an ancient sect of their people that were called known as the Golden Witch Breed, who basically caused massacres and people dying. And it's her explorations of all this. I'm trying not to say much about it, and what she finds out about them. But it's the world building. I hate the phrase world building, but it's the world that she's on that really grips you about the story and the background to all the people on the planet of Orth and their ancient culture that's come through. But great book, very gentle. I've read the follow-up to that, and I think I've read the third one of that, but I've never read anything else by her. I know that she's written a couple of quite well-respected books after that, but there was a couple that people said were terrible. And I don't know why I've not really followed her around as an author. But Golden Witch Breed, if you've not read any, and if you like a good sort of sociological science fiction book, I think that's what you can call it. And then 36, I will show you, it's Riverworld and Other Stories. So it's not, it is the original short story of Riverworld, because the book of the series, the first book is To Your Scattered Bodies Go. I picked this because the original short story is really great, and it's also got some other Philip Jose Farmer's other great stories. And if you don't know, Riverworld is this world where people get reincarnated along this endless river, and they sort of get reborn there, and it's got famous people along there like Samuel Clemens and anybody, even bad people and good people, and people get reincarnated and they travel along this river and all this weird stuff happens. But it's basically aliens reincarnating people. I love Philip Jose Farmer. It's quite a weird idea, but then it means all these characters from history sort of interact with each other, and they still have memories. And yeah, I don't know how to describe it. I really don't know how to describe the Riverworld to anybody who's never read it. It was I think there's been 2 or 3 bad films about it that sort of haven't taken it well, and this needs a big proper HBO series of Riverworld, and they could do it justice. But they probably won't. But then I wouldn't let something like Apple get hold of it after what they did to Foundation, but that's another discussion. So yeah, Riverworld. And that's it. That is the final one of this 20 books. I said in no particular order. They could technically be swapped around with the next 20 I'm going to show you. I apologise if I rambled too much, because I'm not going to go back through and re-record all this, because it's taken me quite a while and my mouth's really dry. But I hope you like this selection of books. And I said if you want to see the full list, I will see if I can get a link to it below onto my Goodreads. But if not, just go to my Goodreads and then you can go into my profile and find it. But yeah, on Wednesday we'll have the next 20, and maybe I won't ramble as much. Maybe I'll make more sense. And I will speak to you all very soon, and I'm going to go off and have some birthday cake. I'll put a picture of my birthday cake up on the community tab later, and then you can have a look at that. Anyway, I will speak to you all very soon. Bye.